Hello, everyone. This is Keith Stone from the Center for Hellenic Studies, here again with Greg and Janet and Sarah to discuss a few questions related to the HeroesX course and with relevance for all that we do, really. And we're talking this week mostly about, let's see, Clytemnestra, which is a character that I love to death because she's so complex. And there's so many comparisons to be made and contrasts to other characters that we encounter in these works. Let me just read the discussion question that's going to be the basis for our discussion. It says, how does the anger of Clytemnestra over the killing of her daughter Iphigeneia shape the character of this complex character? And that's your question, Greg. Any thoughts on that to get us going before we delve into the responses?
Well, just in general, well, when you do the reconstruction of the name, the best explanation that I've seen is that it means she who is famous for her suitors. And you think, well, that's more appropriate to her sister, Helen, because in most versions of the myth, Helen is the sister of Clytemnestra. And it's almost as if the figure of Clytemnestra and the figure of Helen, if you put them together, could be considered a composite. It's as if they are twins, just as Agamemnon and Menelaus are, to some extent, twins in our reconstructions of what these figures, Agamemnon and Menelaus, were like 200, 300, 400 or more years earlier. So it's twins and twins, and I don't want to get too much more into it, but what clearly happens by the time of the 5th century is that Helen and Clytemnestra are such distinct personalities. They have been treated so often in so many ways by various kinds of poetic traditions that about the only thing they have in common is their complexity, both of them. And in a kind of different negative way, Clytemnestra is so different from Helen. And we don't think of her as an attractive woman, but she obviously is. And when I say attractive, I mean intellectually and physically and in every way. So to me, she's not just some evil counterpart to other female characters in the Trojan War story. And she has a lot of grievances, and that certainly came up on the part of the respondents. I loved what one of the participants said about the trampling of the delicate article of clothing by Agamemnon, that he's essentially goaded into destroying something that is very precious, just as he destroys the most precious relationship he should have, which is with his daughter, since he's obviously pretty alienated from his wife.
Mm-hmm. That alienation is another of the things that someone's brought up as well, referring back to Iliad, where he's saying, I like this woman better than my wife. And
it's so disturbing. And Sarah, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because I think there is an epithet there, which is kouridie, which is usually translated as lawfully wedded, but really means somebody that somebody courted at an impressionable age. So it's like, I almost want to say young love, that a kouridios or a kouridie spouse is somebody who was the first love or a young love. And for a young love to be treated so contemptuously some years later is very disturbing. So that Iliad passage, to me, shows how insensitive Agamemnon is from the start. He is not a sympathetic figure in Homeric poetry already. I used to think that he was more sympathetic. I didn't say that right. I meant simpatico. I meant two-way street, that we can sympathize with him more. But the older I get, the less I sympathize with him.
But they're both sort of traded in for a younger model, haven't they?
Yeah,
They've both got other partners, yeah.
Oh, definitely, definitely. He wants to make Cassandra a trophy wife, so to speak. And
how old is it? Just this? I was just thinking he's the same generation as them, right?
Well,
that's a variation.
Yes, I think we'd have to look up the family tree here. I've forgotten. I think I thought he was an nephew, but maybe not.
He's a very complex character, and so I'm reluctant to say how old he is. I don't know. My instincts tell me he's younger, maybe not by much, but in any case, I'm sure he's very attractive, and I'm sure that she is as well. So there's real chemistry there.
The play does treat him as, if not explicitly younger, as less experienced and less.
Yes.
Clytemnestra is given the lead role, and she's the mastermind, as someone pointed out in the forum, and she's in charge, and he's the accomplice or the junior partner. So he certainly acts like a younger, with the sidekick. Like,
you know, one thing that is so maddeningly complicated about this whole family is that because of the enmity between Argos and Sparta, a lot of the myths get reshaped and reappropriated, and there's a big problem about where exactly Agamemnon is assassinated when he finally lands. And when we read Odyssey 3 and Odyssey 4, that already is a political football about whether he gets killed in Spartan territory or in Argive territory. All of which to say that Aegisthus himself is a very complicated figure, and how he is a survivor, and what kind of agenda he has in this very dysfunctional family tree. It's all very, very complicated. And I wish I could say that I can wrap my mind around all of it. I can't. But from just looking at the Agamemnon, I think it's a very interesting couple, this pair of Clytemnestra and Aegisthus. Very interesting. They're not, I hate to use that word, villains, or they can't just be typed as villains. And I'm saying villains in the modern sense.
Mm-hmm. So is she a dedicated mom? Her motherhood comes and shapes her.
I think that her role as a mother is perfectly in tune with other traditional mothers, and she should be a grieving mother. And she certainly had nothing to do with the execution, the human sacrifice of Iphigeneia. Of course, that whole theme is so modern for Aeschylus, because in the older version of the myth, Iphigeneia, of course, survives, or should I say, dies and then is reborn as a goddess, as an aspect of Artemis. So there's been a lot of reshaping of the Iphigeneia figure to accentuate just the brutality of even considering killing Iphigeneia, and so there are moments in the Agamemnon, and I think even in the later dramas, that indicate a real sorrow and anger on the part of Clytemnestra as the avenging fury who will exact vengeance for the killing of Iphigeneia. So that's another complication. And I like the way one of our respondents had a whole catalog of dimensions for Clytemnestra, and as I was reading through, I think every one of them made sense to me, like the one about brooding on vengeance, yes. And then maybe the self-interest of just getting rid of the king, since she is now the lover of Aegisthus. And then the question is, well, is she to be pitied? Well, I think the fact that she is killed by Orestes is again something that has a lot of pathos in it. The killing is not a gratifying experience, I think, for people who are participants in this play, in this drama, in this tragedy. By participants, I just wanted to avoid the word audience, but as you know, I feel very strongly that the people who go to theater, if we imagine 20,000 or even 30,000 of them, they're having their emotions tested, even purged by way of being drawn into this. And they're certainly not a passive audience. The people who go to theater as organized by the Athenian state. Athenian state theater is not entertainment. It's not just theater going as we think of it. So these are very, very complex and I think frontally confronted problems and emotional obstacles, the anger, sadness, and then even the joy of Schadenfreude when Agamemnon is killed. All those emotions make sense to me. And in some situations, I love to show clips from Ingmar Bergman's, or should I say Bergman's, film version of Mozart's The Magic Flute, where the character of the Queen of the Night, I think in her two arias, the first one kind of a sad one, the second one an angry one, those two arias are so beautiful, even though the emotions that are represented can be frightening. But that's part of, I think, the processing of emotions. I don't know, Sarah and Janet and Keith, whether you like the Queen of the Night, but I really like her. So of course I like Clytemnestra too.
I definitely do. She definitely is. I mean, I definitely see her point.
Oh yes.
And some of the things that were pointed out in the forum remind me that she's very similar to, well, Odysseus in some ways, where she says at the end of the tragedy to Aegisthus, we will set the house aright, or we will order it correctly or something.
Yes.
That's what Odysseus does when he gets back to his house, is he purges all of the evildoers.
Yes.
And
yes.
sets his house aright. Or Clytemnestra is given a bad, or her intelligence and calculation is given kind of a negative spin, as if she's masculine for those qualities. But Penelope is also very cunning, and it's good for her to be that way. She's a match of Odysseus.
Yes, would it be okay if we revisited Odyssey 24 here? Mm-hmm. I can't help it. I just really need to think of that again, and the way the resentful spirit of Agamemnon in Hades says that the difference between what happened to him and what happened to Odysseus is the two wives. That Penelope made the homecoming of Odysseus a possibility, whereas Clytemnestra made the homecoming of Agamemnon an impossibility, and thus ruining his epic reputation, let alone the story of his homecoming, which can no longer be successful. It fascinates me that in the Odyssey, it's made very clear that Agamemnon landed safely. He had a fairly good sea voyage compared to others, and then he gets killed by Aegisthus and Clytemnestra after he lands. So that's really something. And then when I think of Penelope, I can't shake that strange moment when Penelope challenges the disguised Odysseus to interpret this dream that she has, how she's looking out at the courtyard and there are her geese pecking away at the grain in the courtyard, and suddenly out of nowhere this eagle swoops down and slaughters all the geese. And then what does she do? She cries uncontrollably. And you say, why is she crying over these geese? Aren't these geese representing the suitors? And if there's any doubt, then the dream goes on that the eagle starts talking to Penelope. And this is a self-interpreting dream, because in the dream, the eagle says, well, I killed these geese, but I am Odysseus and the geese are the suitors. So how can that be more self-interpreting? And that, of course, that gives Odysseus the opportunity to say, in interpreting the dream, well, my lady, what you dreamt is what it meant, because the talking eagle said what it means. So I'm off the hook. But what people have noticed is that this dream of Penelope is a dream that comes through the gate of horn and not the gate of ivory. And of course, there's a word play where horn is associated with the truth and ivory is associated with deception. So the fact that the dream comes through the gate of horn implies in the poetics of the Odyssey that it's a dream that's true to life. But then there's the problem that horn already back then in the ancient world was used as an aphrodisiac. So for the dream to be associated with horn, and excuse me for being somewhat vulgar in using this English expression, but because horn is an aphrodisiac is why the slang word horny happens. So there is a sexuality attached to the feelings of this beautiful and attractive woman, Penelope, when the suitors who have been there paying attention to her for 20 years, and where was Odysseus? And when they're killed, and how are you going to rebuild 20 years of interrupted relationship? Saying, oh, I'm home now, let's continue where we left off. It just doesn't work that way. And similarly with Clytemnestra, okay, it's 10 years, not 20 years in this case, but the way I think the way she could feel about somebody who's around, whereas Agamemnon is away, would justify in some ways how she is portrayed. So I'm not trying to be an apologist on the level of morality for any of these characters, because that's not our business. Myth, I think, is basically dysfunctional. And it's okay to say that everybody's making terrible moral mistakes. But I think the character development here is truly insightful and even exquisite. And as I say, I see comparable things. And I'm so glad that Keith brought up Penelope. In the case of Penelope and Odysseus, that relationship could have gone wrong. And of course, there's a grotesque variant, which was a legitimate variant attested by Duris of Samos, where Penelope has sex with every one of the suitors. So that's a kind of negative, nightmarish version of what could have happened even in the Odyssey. Not in our Odyssey, but there were obviously kind of mock Odysseys or buffa Odysseys where that tradition really did happen. And my God, when I think of how difficult it was for Odysseus to win the love of Penelope, there are good accounts of that in, of all people, Pausanias. Pausanias can chart the the honeymoon trip of Odysseus and Penelope, that relationship is pretty complex too. So I find it so realistic that a relationship like that in a dysfunctional era of myth can go wrong, very, very, very wrong. And it's fascinating.
So do you think for ancient Greek audiences that those two pairings are always in mind? Whenever you think of Odysseus and Penelope, you think of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra, and vice versa.
Exactly.
And in fact, we've talked before about how well matched Odysseus and Penelope are. I'm wondering, just as we've been talking, are Agamemnon and Clytemnestra well matched?
Yes.
In that they're the kind of opposite of that.
Yes, and I think that challenge that Clytemnestra sets up for Agamemnon to trample that beautiful piece of tapestry is exhibit A to prove your point, dear Sarah, because it takes one to know one. And to devise that kind of temptation, you'd have to think along very similar lines. And I love the way she says, go ahead and trample on it. If it took 10,000 or 100,000, I forget the statistics, of little people collecting these tiny little murex shells and then extracting the purple from them, imagine the cost of that. It's mind-boggling, not to mention the human labor of weaving the tapestry. So that's really an expensive piece of precious material. I mean, hyper expensive. And then for her to say, go ahead, trample on it. There's plenty more where that came from, that dye. It's like the perfect example of greedy, uncaring, exploiting people today who care nothing about the environment. And again, the trap that she sets is in a sense, woven by way of the same kind of mentality that leads to Agamemnon's then stepping on it and destroying it.
And Clytemnestra is not the weaver. She doesn't say, I have done this for you with my hands. But Penelope was a weaver. She was weaving.
Ooh.
And unweaving.
Oh my God. You know, Janet, you just raised a beautiful possibility. What if she did weave it? Then all the labor that went into it is like the labor of giving birth to Iphigeneia. She talks about her labor, literally her labor in giving birth to Iphigeneia. Wow. Janet, I think you should write that up. I love that. What if she wove it?
Yeah, she definitely wove the plan that ensnared Agamemnon. Aeschylus makes a big deal out of that.
Oh, I love it.
The doors of entrapment as he. I mean, I think I've always felt Aeschylus is a little bit heavy-handed. He identifies femininity with
And thinking about her one child and not thinking about the rest of the family, that is also interesting. And her end comes from and the pollution going on in the family.
Yes. Of course, then she becomes such a nasty mother in the libation bearers, where Electra, who is not one of the girls mentioned in Iliad 9, where Electra is being treated like a Cinderella-like stepdaughter. Another complication. The complications of Clytemnestra are inexhaustible, just as I'm now tempted to say, inspired by Janet, just as maybe the tapestry she weaves, which traps Agamemnon, is as complicated as that must be. Ooh.
Something for you to write off.
I like it. I like it. It gives so much more sense, I think, to the meaning of that web. Just as, think of it, when Clytemnestra's sister, Helen, is seen for the first time in the Iliad, what is she doing? She's weaving a web, and it is dyed purple, which stands for, the words of the Iliad say so, it stands for the blood that is shed by both Trojans and Achaeans, all because of her. So it's a, shall I say it, a blood-stained web. My.
How about Penelope? What's she doing when we first see her? Does she come down from her rooms? Is that her first?
What Clytemnestra's doing when we first see her? Yeah, because...
No, Penelope.
Oh, Penelope. Yeah, she comes down from upstairs. That's exactly what she does. And actually Clytemnestra comes down from upstairs.
Okay.
When the news is announced. When she speaks, she has descended from the queen's quarters upstairs.
And that's where the weaving would take place that the queen does?
Oh, exactly. The weaving would be upstairs. Yeah, I think so.
Oh, I just wanted to point out that Penelope too is famous for her suitors. So the name Clytemnestra could just as easily be her name.
It's true. It's true. Absolutely. Yeah. And okay, shall I complicate things a bit? Which is that it's pretty clear that to me at least, that the older form of the name Clytemnestra has MN, which would mean famous for her suitors. If it's just M, and there is a tradition where it's just M, Clytemnestra, then it's famous for the evil things that she does, or I shouldn't say evil, for the crafty things that she does. So that name would have to do with her weaving of plots, shall we say, but also, who knows, weaving the web that Agamemnon stepped on and that notionally ensnares her. We also must make the distinction between the fabric that Agamemnon steps on and then the net, whatever that is, that Agamemnon gets entangled in when he's actually slaughtered by Aegisthus and Clytemnestra, and their famous vase paintings that show an entangled Agamemnon. But there it's not tapestry, it's something like a net. Oh, and I just thought of
an animal or something. Yeah.
You know, I just thought of something else. The net would be what shall we say, fishes out of the boundless sea all of its bounties, right?
Mm-hmm. Like a whale.
Yes, yes.
Chicken as whale, Odysseus' whale coming.
I think we're weaving pretty well today, aren't we? With further connections that I've never seen. And my God, I've lived with this play since I was 18, and I'm now gazillion years older and never thought of these things. I love it. It just shows the dialogue about text is everything. You can't read alone. You have to read with colleagues and friends.
Well, I think that's a great thought to end on, since we're
Yes.
about up for our time.
Yes.
So.
And I just hope for our respondents, and I bet some of them have been reading with friends and family members or loved ones, whatever, that I hope that the readings out there are happy and that they're dialogic, just as ours has been. And there's a great pleasure in reading a text together like this.
Exactly.
Yep, love it.
All right, well, thanks again, you three, and see you again in a week.
Looking forward to it. Bye, everyone.
Yeah.